This is William K. Murtaugh, Mert Witness 1. And today I'm going to discuss heat. And where this comes from is that I have been studying various comments turning up on Twitter and elsewhere about the Conspiracy Nuts article concerning a tweet that President Trump was supposed to have sent. Now, I have dealt with this matter in the past two Mobileathons that I put up in proving that this was an outright lie, that it was a hoax, and that people had been sandbagged and sucked into this conspiracy theory. And I also reminded people that this is at least the fourth time that I have nailed this particular conspiracy nut for either fabricating false stories or being misled to the point where he published stuff that is false that is easily debunked. Now, it's one thing for me to question the writings of this individual. It's quite another for people that are supposedly on his side to question his writing, and this is apparently what is starting to happen. There are comments going up on social media regarding the validity of some of the material that is being put out there by this phony task force. And people are saying that there are questions regarding the validity of this particular claim about the president making this declaration, and they've had to admit that it's false, that they checked and found that the post was false and had to make the retraction. Well, the question, of course, is why didn't they check the story before they published it? This is what a journalist does. You know, if this man's going to claim he's a journalist and he puts this nonsense up, then he's not much of a journalist, because he's not following the methodology that a journalist uses in tracking down whether or not a story is true. So, he gets questioned about whether or not the thing actually happened by his allies. And it's being done over and over again. And these are not just ordinary people. These are people that I guess you would say are prominent in the conspiracy theorist circles. They're well known. They have large Twitter accounts. And thus, the questioning of this person about this tweet is being seen by a lot of people on their side. So he's not only discrediting himself to the main audience of the general public, but the choir is starting to object to being sung to or preached to with erroneous beliefs and thoughts and so forth. And this is where we're going here. You know, and this is going to happen more often as the whole structure of the conspiracy theory breaks down. Now, on another remarkable post that happened, there was a supposed message by QAnon that popped up. The only problem is that if you take a very, very close look, which people rarely do, at the bottom of this cryptic message, you would see that a statement was made that this is not necessarily the opinion of the management. In other words, the domain where this so-called message appeared won't back it. And they're very specific about it. And this is none other than 8chan, the big conspiracy site where all this stuff was created. QAnon was created on 8chan and 4chan and 8chan. The people that make this stuff up are on these various domains. They're famous for spreading crap. The movement Anonymous came out of 4chan. And as a bunch of juvenile delinquents, they have nothing better to do than make fools out of people. And this is exactly what they're doing. And they sit back and they laugh because they're able to make fools out of people. But even this is not acceptable. You're getting QAnons agreeing with QAnons, disagreeing with QAnons. So, you know, we're starting to see a lot of cracks in the foundation here. That people are starting to turn against each other because all of a sudden they're beginning to realize that whatever it is that they were trying to do is failing. That people are waking up to the fact that this is all a bunch of crap. It's BS. And everybody's time and effort has been wasted on playing these secret kids in a cardboard shed games. That the little secret club has turned out to be nothing but a play of fantasy or what have you. And so eventually things are going to cave in. Now, I'm going to go back to Field McConnell for a minute. The legal minds, so to speak, of those that wrote on social media that the victim in the case committed perjury, this, that, and the other thing, you might want to consider the source of this information. It actually came out of a pretend lawyer or whatever the hell he is up in Minnesota. And he somehow got to Field's wife and made the suggestion to send a letter complaining about the paperwork that had to do with the initial reporting of events. The only problem is they got things a little mixed up because what was reported had nothing to do with Field McConnell. It had to do with another individual. But besides that, it is unlikely, almost 99.9% uncertain, that the motion is going to be denied. And the reason it's going to be denied is because Field McConnell has provided terabytes of proof that he was stalking and harassing the victim of the case. That he made threats, he went on the air waving a gun around, and so on and so forth. And as for the second half of the court filings that are going to be coming up, the defense made the claim that Field McConnell is not able to broadcast from his house. And once again, people have to be reminded that you don't need a commercial grade studio with expensive equipment and sound engineers and all this other crap to live stream. You can do it with a cell phone. You can do it with a cheap computer with a built-in webcam and free software. You don't need an elaborate broadcast studio. And as a point of fact, Field McConnell did, on occasion, live stream from his house. People can be called into court to testify that he live streamed out of his house. There's proof of it. And there are pictures of him in his house live streaming. The picture of the Field waving the gun around was done in his house. The staircase is in the background. His so-called studio that he had in downtown Plum City is a single-story building. It did not have a staircase. So why is there a staircase in more than one of Phil McConnell's live streams? And another example is if you look at some of the videos that were made on Phil McConnell's channel, you would see people coming in and out of another room. The studio at the bank where Phil McConnell did some of his live streams is a one-room suite. There's only one room. I don't think there's even a bathroom in the building. So people coming in and out of wherever were not coming in and out of the studio at the bank. They were coming in and out of a separate room from Phil McConnell's house. People were staying at the house. They were streaming out of the same studio at the house. They weren't going to downtown Plum City on live stream or city and live streaming. They were live streaming from Phil's house. There were discussions about using the facilities at Phil McConnell's house. There are no bedrooms at the bank. There is nothing. So where were these people at that were with Phil McConnell? Were they sleeping on the floor at the bank? Where did they take a bath? Where did they go to the bathroom? Where did they do all this stuff? They sure as hell weren't staying at the bank. They were staying at Phil McConnell's house, which is about a 10-minute drive from the bank. So this talk about there not being a studio at Phil McConnell's house is a load of crap. And it'll be proven in court. And Phil McConnell is not going to be going to Plum City. And this argument that he can't see his wife in Plum City is kind of weird, because the last anyone knew, Phil McConnell's wife was not in the United States. Now, maybe she is. Maybe somehow, by some miracle, they were able to get her over here, because she was having some bad passport problems and could not get a passport to get back in the United States. This is a battle that had been going on for quite some time. Now, apparently, that battle has been won. And then there's the question of the house itself. And something that's probably going to be pointed out in the upcoming Zoom meeting that's scheduled in January, and that is that Phil McConnell's house is in the process of being foreclosed upon. They have been granted, the bank has been granted possession of the house by the court. They own the house. And it's going to be up to the bank to decide when they are going to kick people out of there. Now, right now, it's rather convenient to have people in the house to take care of it, to make sure that it doesn't get vandalized as a party house or something, that, you know, people are at least maintaining the house. They don't have to pay a property management company to maintain the house. But at some point, the bank is going to say, okay, it's time to move. We are taking formal possession of the house. You are ordered to leave, and the stuff with the house and everything in it at the time of the vacancy is going to be sold. And so this is where we're at. And so Bill McConnell can't go back to Plum City because he may not have a house to live in. It may be gone. And by the time the hearing is held in court to have him move to Plum City, the house may be gone. You know, they're not going to court until January, 2-3 weeks from now. And in that amount of 2 or 3 weeks, a lot can happen. The bank could say, okay, time to put the house up for sale. Everybody get out. Then you're going to have a problem. Because then the company that was hired to monitor Field McConnell as part of his house arrest is going to have to report to the court that this guy no longer has a house. You know, and so unless he finds an apartment real quick or someplace else to live, we have no way of monitoring this guy. And, you know, and the court's going to say, well, he can't go back to Plum City. He got nowhere to live. And if he goes back to Plum City, anybody that's in the house that isn't a resident of the house is going to have to leave. And there are people living in that house right now that don't belong there. And so all those people will have to move out. So this business of Field being better off in Plum City than in Florida is not going to be accepted by the court. It's not valid. So his only choice, if he can't stay in the house in Stewart, is he's going to have to go back to jail. Now this brings up another point. What in hell happened in Florida that caused this situation to come up? Apparently there's some kind of an emergency that came up that is forcing Field to have to move. That is forcing Field to try and get back to his house in Plum City. There's been a crisis in the family. Apparently it's medical in nature. And considering what's going on right now, there's probably one answer to this, and that is that somebody in the family may have caught the COVID. And because of this, you know, they are either in quarantine or having to do something in order to alleviate this medical emergency. And the one thing that needs to be alleviated is getting Field McConnell the hell out of the house. At least that's the excuse. Another possibility could be that everybody's getting cabin fever and they would prefer it if Field McConnell wasn't there. And so they decided to say, oh, we have a medical emergency as an effective way of getting him out of the house. I mean, people don't necessarily have to tell the truth unless they go under oath and say, oh no, we just did this to get Field out of the house. You know, if they want to prevent the danger of getting slapped with a perjury charge by lying about why they need to get Field McConnell out of the house. You know, this question may come up in January because there's going to have to be specific proof as to the legitimacy for the request to get Field McConnell out of the house. They just can't go into court and say, well, the son's getting fed up with Field being in the house, and we want him to leave, because then the only alternative is to put Field McConnell back in jail. And it's convenient to come up with a medical emergency because under the law, the court gets to hide the information. So the general public is not going to be able to know why it became necessary to come up with this convenient excuse to get Field McConnell back to Wisconsin. But as I stated, because of the instability when it comes to the situation of the house, I rather doubt that Field McConnell's going to be going back there for that reason alone. Because he cannot guarantee to the court that the house is not going to be foreclosed on to the point where he has to leave, because the foreclosure's already taken place. You know, and I don't care how many times that pretend real estate broker comes into my house or into my chat and argues that that's not the case. It is the case. You can go through foreclosure and the bank will let you stay in the house until they feel like doing something about it. I went through a short sale, which is the exact same thing that's happening to the house with Field McConnell. Now, if I hadn't accepted the conditions of the short sale, I would have been evicted from the house, because a short sale is a form of foreclosure. It's a way for the person that's being foreclosed on to save his ass and to come out ahead, because they become a real estate agent, where they agree to have the house open for inspection if prospective buyers want to come and look at it. And that's usually what happens. And it is also common now, as it was then, in order for the bank to save on maintenance costs and so forth having to do with an abandoned property, to let people stay in the house, because at least they know there's someone taking care of the house. If a water main breaks or there's a fire, the people living there can remedy the situation much more quickly than if nobody was in the house at all. And they might keep the lawn mowed and the driveway cleared in the winter and this sort of thing. So there's people there to guard the house. The bank is not going to go up there to sell the house and find all the windows broken and the interior gutted and trash in the driveway and all kinds of stuff, because the people are living there that used to own the house, and they're going to take some reasonable care of it. You know, some people don't. I remember watching these shows on TV where people go out and buy repossessed houses at auction in order to remodel them. And the houses were anywhere from reasonably well maintained to being completely trashed. You know, depending on the attitude of the person being foreclosed upon. They get mad enough, they ruin the house. And that's what you expect when you get into this business. So we don't know what condition that house is in or is going to be in by the time the bank is going to take it over. But the bank is hedging their bets by allowing people to stay in the house in order to maintain it. And that at some point, when they feel the market is right, they are going to put the house up for sale. You know, right now, this country is in a mess, economically and health-wise, with the COVID. And so this is not the best time to put a house up for sale. But at some point, things are going to start changing. It's going to get to the point where the house is a liability and the bank is going to say, hey, we've got to do something. Because this house is in the middle of nowhere. It's in a really, really, really small town. It's not in the kind of place where people buy expensive houses. So they're going to lose a lot of money on the house no matter what. You know, anybody that wants to buy this house in the foreclosure process is probably going to get a hell of a deal. The house is probably going to go for half its assessed value. Because when the house goes up for a sheriff sale, the bank is going to be forced to sell it for whatever it brings. They're not going to be able to put a reserve on it because they don't want to own the house. The whole point of putting a house up for sale is to get rid of it. They want to get as much money out of the house as they can possibly get. So they are going to foreclose on it. And they are going to sell it. And so somebody out there around this spring is going to get a hell of a deal on a house. Because it's not a bad house. It's not as glitzy looking as you see in the real estate broker's listing when the house is originally up for sale. It's deteriorated. Its age is showing. There's going to be a need to do maintenance on the house. So whoever gets the house is going to have to invest money into fixing it. And so, you know, it's a fairly large house. And if you don't have people living in it that can regularly housekeep the house and dust it and stuff, things are going to go downhill. And so this is a consideration people need to put into when they buy a property of this type. And from what I understand from doing some discussions while I was in Plum City, the house is not in the best of condition. And because of that, the price is going to go down on the house. And so we'll see what happens after the first of the year when it comes to the House. But the short of it is that Phil McConnell may not have a house to go back to if, by some extraordinary circumstance, the court decides to send him to Plum City. There ain't going to be a house. And so that's going to be pointed out to the court, or it should be. And the defense is then going to have to come up with a solution. Well, what are we going to do with him? If he doesn't have a house to go back to in Stewart, where are we going to put him? And the answer is you put him back in jail. You put him in the old fort, the place in county jails where they put 74-year-old men that are awaiting trial. There's places he can be sent to that he's not in the general population, and his chances of catching the COVID are that much less. And that he would still be in the state of Florida. And you got to remember, this guy was extradited to the state of Florida. Wisconsin said, yeah, take him. You have the right to him. Here he is. All the dots and all the T's were taken care of. It was a legally executed document. Nobody committed perjury. Bill McConnell convicted himself with his big fat mouth because he listened to some guy living out of a car from Minnesota. What Phil McConnell did was extremely irresponsible. He should have stuck to his 9/11 theories. He should have stuck to his airplanes, and so on and so forth. He had a lot of people that believed in what he was doing. And a lot of people have left him because of his entanglement with this homeless pizza delivery driver. He's ruined himself because he listened to a load of crap. And the chances of Phil McConnell coming out of the situation is slim. And the damage has already been done. He's been out of circulation for over a year now. His studio, such as it was sold right out from under him. So he has no studio anymore. He'd have to start all over again. That's if he was ever allowed to go back on the internet. And if he pulls the same stunt that he pulled before that got him in Florida in the first place, it's going to happen all over again. They'll just turn around and charge him again. Because at some point, people have to understand that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. This woman has had her reputation destroyed. She's had her family harassed. She's been stalked and is still continuing to be stalked by people that don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. They don't know anything. And they're spreading unfounded lies and rumors about this woman and others. And at some point, they are going to have to pay for what they're doing. And they're going to pay for it by going to jail. Or they're going to be sued into bankruptcy. Because, if the criminal court doesn't work, there's always the civil court. The victim in the Phil McConnell debacle could very well someday wind up owning an antique car collection, a whole bunch of corn, any livestock, and equipment. And she could very well own other assets because she has a viable civil case against not only Phil McConnell, but the Children's Crusade and other organizations. So there's always the possibility of a civil lawsuit. And even the cost involved with defending against the civil lawsuit would be enough. Because you have to defend yourself against a civil lawsuit or you get hit with a summary judgment. And so the people being sued are going to have to go out and they're going to have to hire lawyers. And as you can see from Phil McConnell, it's going to take about $50,000 to $100,000 at a minimum to defend yourself against a wealthy lawyer. So I would think that secretly even people are hoping that Phil McConnell doesn't get sent back to Plum City, because that's going to open up a whole new can of worms. Because the next step from criminal court is civil court. And the discovery alone would not be pleasant. Now, I don't know if that's what she has in mind. At the moment, from what I understand, she doesn't even care about all this nonsense on social media. Unlike the people on social media, she has a company to run. She has a legal firm to run. She has employees to keep working. She doesn't have the time for this playground bullshit that's going on social media. She doesn't think very much of social media. You know, there's a complete lack of discipline on social media. People are free to do whatever they want on social media, and there's no accountability. And speaking of that, Trump almost made it possible for people like the PPTF to be made accountable for their actions. He almost did it. Because he wanted to repeal the Section 230 protections that the hosts of these services have against crap being posted by people like the PPTF. Because under the current provision, the PPTF is free to pretty well say what they want, and you can't sue Twitter, YouTube, BitChute, or any of these companies because of that provision. If that provision goes away and the protection is no longer there for these media giants, two things are going to happen. First of all, 95% of independent public YouTube accounts are going to vanish overnight. There will be no more live streaming. There will be no more videos being posted because the domains don't want the liability. They don't want to be sued. So they're going to say, screw it, you're out of here. No more. The PPTF won't be on Twitter. PPTF won't be on BitChute. PPTF won't be anywhere. And neither will QAnon. Because if that protection goes away, people can sue for the content that is on their domain. And if you go around saying that a retired truck driver is an alleged serial killer, your company's going to get sued for allowing that stuff to be posted on your site. And the people doing the publishing ain't going to be sued. It's going to be the company. The company's the one with the deep pockets. The company's the one that has the trillions of dollars in assets that are going to have to pay out in settlements. A lot of people are going to get rich off of YouTube and Twitter and WordPress if this protection is removed. Because these companies, rather than doing these long battles and quarrels, say, screw it, we'll just give you $1 million and we'll shut the thing down. And so all these conspiracy nuts out there are going to lose their freedom of speech. And it's going to be President Trump that did it for them. They can thank President Trump when they lose their freedom of speech because he wants 230 removed from the books. He wants that protection removed because he wants to sue Twitter and Facebook and all these different accounts. But he can't sue the accounts, so he's going to sue Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, so on and so on and so forth. And so these people are going to say, fine, we'll just shut down. No more YouTube. No more Twitter. We'll go back to streaming cats chasing lasers, or dogs carrying sticks so wide they take down a waft of people going down the road, or Russians having car accidents. This is, maybe listen to music or watch movies. That's all we'll be doing on YouTube and so on. We won't be live streaming. We won't be doing this, that, or the other thing, because YouTube and Twitter don't want to get sued. And so it'll end it. That'll be the death of QAnon. That'll be the death of the PPTF. That'll be the end of whatever happened to this unemployed, homeless pizza delivery driver. They'll all be gone. So yeah, remove Section 230. Do it today. This would solve a whole boatload of problems. Because all of a sudden, the responsibility would fall on these corporations for the content of their servers. They would be directly responsible. They would be directly liable. And thus, they would take the direct action necessary to put a stop to this garbage. They would say, all right, enough. We're closing it down. Will be another Netflix, will be another Hulu, will be another HBO. Will be nothing but commercials, which is exactly what they are now. But we're finished. We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to go into the sunset as just another streaming service, but you're not going to be able to live stream anything on this service. Because we don't want the litigation. We don't want somebody being sued because they were on camera that wasn't supposed to be, or they were lied about, or somebody's running around saying that they're a suspected serial killer, or that they're a pedophile, or this, that, or the other thing. No, we're not going to take the responsibility. We're not going to take the liability. So we're done. No more live streaming. No more YouTube videos. None of it. And all the social media companies throughout the world are going to say the same thing. They're going to say, we are not going to be liable for the content of our channels. We're not taking responsibility for what's posted here, so we're going to shut everything down. We'll find some other way to make money. They can make just as much money doing something else, providing commercially viable content by those who can afford to take responsibility for their actions. We're not going to do it. There may be waivers that have to be signed in the terms of service. That means you alone will take responsibility for your content, that you alone can be sued for what you put up there. And you will not be allowed to hide behind secret usernames, that you are going to have to provide true and trackable information about who you are. And you're going to have to agree to make this information available without any complicated legal maneuvering. That if somebody sends a letter to YouTube saying they want to know who is behind the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, they want their name, address, contact information, legal counsel, if any, that YouTube can provide that information without the need for a subpoena. And it's a general request that can be made by a member of the public. It's the same thing that's now done with domain registries. Because unless you pay extra for the privacy, your name and address is out there for whoever wants to know who owns a domain. And even if it's under privacy, there are mechanisms in place to find out who owns the domain. That information has to be provided. That's an agreement you make when you register for a domain. And this is what's going to happen with YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and so on and so forth, is you are going to have to take responsibility, finally, for what you put on their medium. And it will be easier to force you to either take the content down or take responsibility for your actions in court. So by all means, strike down 230. I don't care if I lose my YouTube channel over it, because my whole purpose of being on YouTube is to put a stop to the lies in the first place. So if I can get the lies struck down by the removal of this protection, then all fine and dandy. You know, it's this thing where you wish for something, but be careful what you wish for. Because striking down this protection is something that you're going to regret doing if this goes forward, which I doubt it will. I don't think Trump's going to be able to pull it off, because these companies don't want it. And they just line the pockets of the Republicans and say, hey, don't remove this provision. And this will be the saving grace of QAnon. They'll be able to at least hang around, even if if nobody listens to them anymore. Because the day is coming. The fad is about over. In another 30 days, or less than 30 days, there is going to be a change of administration. We're going to have a new president. And the whole purpose of QAnon is going to be diminished. They're going to try and rescue themselves by, pushing conspiracy theories into the next month. But eventually, by spring, it'll be over. The conspiracy theorist who is homeless is going to find something else to scream about, something else to pretend he's involved with. But it's going to be ever more in the dark, in the background, irrelevant. Because he's turned into a joke. Nothing he has predicted came true. Not a single solitary thing. Nothing. Every day he's shown to be the fool that he is. The big nothing that he is. And he is so ashamed of himself, he's gone into hiding. This is a true reason he's gone into hiding, because he knows he's screwed up. He's been found out. And those who have taken over for him don't care if he's made to look like the fool and the clown he is, because they are accomplishing their goal. They're making their money off it. They're getting the attention they want off it at his expense. And so the joke is on him. He's the fall guy. He's the scapegoat. In the end, he's the one that's going to pay the price. And it's going to be sooner than later. They're going to trick him into going to Minnesota, and then they're going to get him arrested, and they'll be rid of him. They'll hang him out to dry. The blog will either go away, or they'll exploit it by pretending to help him. And they'll rake in the money. They'll start a defense fund, $100,000 defense fund to get our Clark Kent out of the hoosegow. Acquit him. All this. I can see all kinds of possibilities happening with this clown. So we'll see. First of all, we got to find out if he's alive or not. But he's not at Fort Bragg. It didn't take me long to find out, because what I didn't tell the troll on my chat, because I figured I'd let her run her mouth, is that I have contacts within Fort Bragg. I have people I know up there. And I called them over the weekend, and I double-checked the date. Number one, nobody's heard of them. And number two, there's no reason for him to be there. So he's not at Fort Bragg on assignment. There's no reason for him to be at Fort Bragg. It's just something this clown came up with off the top of her head on my show, and I let her run with it. And I figure it's, contact some old friends that I hadn't talked to in a few years, see how things are going. And then, oh, by the way, have you ever heard of this guy from Minnesota who claims to be involved in some way, shape, or form up at Fort Bragg? They said, no. Well, we can check. You know, some of these people are in positions of being able to find out certain things, and so they checked around and said, nope. There's no reason for this guy to be up here. We don't. Number one, we don't tolerate that kind of bullshit that he talks about. So we wouldn't have anything to do with him anyway. And these people are Trump supporters. They say if this guy shows up at Fort Bragg, he'll regret it because we'll throw him in the brig. So he'd best stay away from Fort Bragg and Camp Lejeune and Paris Island and a few other installations, because they're not, you know, they don't want to see people like him show up. They got enough problems. So Fort Bragg turned out to be just another scam, another rumor, just something the troll came up with for entertainment. Just another nothing. Now, on a final note, it looks like I am probably going to have to do any live streaming on my room over at Facebook. I will be continuing to do experimental live streams on Facebook. This time I'm going to try doing it directly from my room, from the desk of Mert Witness One Live, rather than on my Facebook general page. Just so I'm not cluttering up my page with hour-long live streams, and this is a way to archive the live streams on Facebook. And I will get into details as part of my discussion of what is going to happen in 2021. Facebook does not have the restriction that YouTube has for mobile live streaming, which is why I'm making the shift over there. I am still going to do my studio live streams over the Wi-Fi, either at the house or in remote locations where I have Wi-Fi access, because the restriction doesn't apply when I do that. But for mobile live streaming, it looks like I'll be going to Facebook. Periscope is being phased out. I'm not sure what Twitter's going to be doing as far as live streaming, so that's another thing that I'm going to have to consider. The only reason I had chosen YouTube for live streaming is because they don't require you to have a YouTube account to view content. You can just look it up and view it. Facebook and Twitter, you have to sign on in order to view content. So, because of that reason, anybody that wants to watch me on Facebook is going to have a Facebook account. That's not my policy, it's Facebook. Same is true of Twitter. But YouTube, right now, the only reason you need to have a YouTube account is if you want to leave a comment. If you don't want to leave a comment, you can view YouTube content without subscribing to YouTube. I would prefer you would, so I could build my subscriber count up, but other than that, it's not necessary. Well, it's time for me to go do stuff off the internet. I'll be popping in like I always do on Twitter and Facebook and wherever, you know, leaving messages, reading the goings on in the world of the wild and wacky internet. And so with that, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll see you again sometime. This is William K. Murtaugh, Mert Witness One. Have a good one.